starting to see exponential adoption of clean energy technologies worldwide. And the speed is moving and accelerating much faster than most people appreciate. By going faster, you secure not just your place in history, but your place in the future.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Humpton, CEO of Siemens USA, and you're listening to The Optimistic Outlook. Let me open this episode with a question. What's the difference between feeling hopeful and being optimistic? Well, there's no perfect answer to this, but I ask because oftentimes I hear these terms being used interchangeably, when for me, there are some subtle differences. If I'm feeling hopeful, I'm hearing something that indicates a positive outcome is likely, whereas with optimism, it's a little different. What I'm feeling is the confidence that a problem is solvable. I say this because after this episode, you're going to be feeling both hopeful and optimistic when it comes to the clean energy transition. My guest today, Jon Creyts, is the CEO of RMI, an organization working to transform global energy systems through market-driven solutions. And I want to pick up our conversation with Jon offering a view of the energy transition that might surprise you. All right, take a listen. We hear a lot about different things. We're not moving fast enough, or maybe we'll never make it. We've heard people say, yeah, we're going to be successful, but I'm not sure that we can hit the timelines that are needed. Where are we right now in the energy transition?
A lot of people today are fixated on the tipping points that we're hitting in nature. And to be clear, we are hitting those natural tipping points. But what they're missing is that we're also hitting positive tipping points on climate solutions as well. And we're starting to see exponential adoption of clean energy technologies worldwide. Solar and wind are now the cheapest source of new energy for 85% of people on the planet. And those costs are still falling by as much as 50% by the end of this decade. Just last year, renewable capacity grew 50%. That's the biggest jump in 20 years. We installed 540 gigawatts of renewables last year. That's equivalent to the capacity of all the generation in Germany and Japan combined. And that trend is continuing this year, right? So we have to recognize that this year we're going to install as much as that entire total from last year in just solar alone. The IEA itself is telling us that in just 5 years, we'll install as much renewable capacity as the fossil fuel industry managed in the past 120 years. Back in 2020, it was only 1 in 20 cars globally that was electric. Last year, it was 1 in 5 cars. In 2026, it'll be 1 in 2 cars sold globally are going to be electric. And the batteries are a big part of that story. Last year, battery prices dropped nearly 50%. That is going to keep propelling these exponential growths in markets. So the energy transition is very much underway, and the speed is moving and accelerating much faster than most people appreciate.
Yeah, when things go exponential at first, it's almost undetectable. But eventually, exponential growth really does become very visible and phenomenal. What are some of the significant actions that have led us to this moment?
On the technology side, we're hitting milestones all the time, and we've seen energy storage drop in cost dramatically. Now we're starting to rally around needed things like hydrogen for sustainable aviation fuel and green ammonia and other areas. Air conditioners that are in most windows today were invented back in the 1910 or so by James Carrier. We have the ability to improve on that technology, and we set a goal of a 5-fold more efficient air conditioner at less than twice the price. And we went out to market. We had over 2,100 submissions from 90 plus countries. And in the end, we had 10 finalists. 2 of them had produced air conditioners that were more than 5-fold more efficient at less than twice the price. Both are being produced now at scale by 2 leading companies that bought these startups, and they're being produced now to help solve the problem of a heating planet, but without heating it further. But I think the biggest tipping point that folks may not be aware of is that on the investment side, we've actually tipped markets to favor clean energy technologies. And this year, we're going to double the rate of spending on clean energy relative to fossil fuels. We'll spend $2 trillion on clean energy relative to only $1 trillion on fossil fuels. Even today, we invest more in solar than we invest in oil.
there's a strong business case to be made. And you've talked a lot about systems thinking that can help move teams of people forward. Help us understand why even non-engineers should be embracing this concept.
Yeah, I mean, we used to talk about the idea of a green premium, and now we think about a green prize, right? And the energy transition, as we look at it, it's the biggest investment opportunity in human history. We're going to spend $3 to $5 trillion per year, every year for the next 25 years to build a new and better economy. But it's highly integrated. And when we talk about this renewable transition, we're talking about how renewable energy and batteries impact transportation, how electrification transforms how we manufacture things, how buildings become smart and interactive, and how people and the grid digitalize together. This is about how we have new supply chains that create jobs and reshape entire economies. And you don't need to be an engineer to see that everything is converging. And if you want to stay competitive, you've got to understand how these pieces fit together. And so companies that see this realize that embracing net zero, it's about that competitive business choice. It's about leading in the next energy economy and understanding how this economy is going to be digitalized and interactive and powered by clean electrons and green molecules. Because when you compartmentalize, you naturally limit the potential solutions that exist. And Dwight Eisenhower, famously said, if you want to solve a complex problem, expand the boundaries of it.
What are the biggest challenges we'll face in achieving the energy transition? And how do we address them?
The challenges are no longer about technology or economics. We've actually got most of what we need, especially for the next decade. The real challenge starts with ourselves, right? It's about changing a lot of the human processes that exist so that we keep pace with this exponential change that's happening. And when I look at the biggest bottleneck in the system right now, it's infrastructure, right? It's our outdated permitting processes, it's slow regulations, it's misaligned policies that are holding us back. Right now, it can take 5 to 6 years in the United States to connect clean energy projects to the grid. We need to just change the way that we approach this overall transition and stop solving today's problems with yesterday's technologies and really start building the grid of the future with more renewables, with more energy storage, with more advanced grid technologies. We need to be able to produce SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, and green hydrogen. We need to be able to store CO2. But I think it comes back to another big issue that we have, which is about our mindset and awareness. We, as humans, aren't programmed to think in this exponential world that we're entering. When technologies like batteries fall 50% in cost in a year, we're not adjusting our decision-making processes fast enough. We are, in some ways, lacking in the creativity and imagination to solve some of our big challenges in new ways. Energy efficiency is more important than ever. It's the fastest, cheapest way for us to cut emissions globally, but it's not getting the attention it deserves. And whether you want to build more data centers faster, whether you want to electrify a truck stop, whether you want to create an apartment or a factory that's running on electricity, or whether you want to support energy access to the most needy parts of the world, every kilowatt hour that we save through efficiency cuts 3 times the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere as the equivalent new generation that we produce.
You've got me thinking about our partnership with Breakthrough Energy, the organization founded by Bill Gates with investment partners, where they took a step into this world of transformation and said, we're gonna address these global grand challenges, the future of electricity, the future of manufacturing, the decarbonization that's needed across these high emitting businesses. And the initial step they took was to find innovators, find technologies. But that work naturally led then to other questions about the ecosystem, the system of systems. And ultimately, it led to a relationship with Siemens. Because as a large employer, as a large manufacturer, Siemens occupies this global space working on these topics. We could actually be part of generating the demand signal so that we could take technologies to scale. I want our audience to get a good feel for the importance of the demand side, the importance of customers, companies like ours who stand up and make commitments, and companies like the tech companies you're working with, the hyperscalers we serve. They're actually driving a market. Fill us in on how you see this demand creation helping to accelerate progress.
When you think about how it is we drive change at scale, we need to think in systems. And it's about, yes, having that technology available, like what Siemens provides. And then it's about creating the market demand. And then it's about getting the finance community to ultimately support that transition. And then it's about creating the ratchet with policies that actually make sure that in the system, we're constantly increasing ambition, increasing capacity in the market. Companies have linked up to pull together and create the capacity to buy things like sustainable aviation fuel. And there's an alliance of companies that have said we're going to purchase clean aviation fuel and are willing to buy down some of the cost. You have similar emerging activities around green steel, where you see, kind of multiple key leading companies that have put out a new spec and a new RFP to purchase green steel here in the United States, and in the process are providing some of the financing tranches so that we actually get the first kind of green steel facility here in the United States.
As soon as we're able to express a goal, a challenge, we see the creativity of individuals who pull together and rise to that challenge. We also know that energy is prosperity, right? Our economy in the U.S. can only grow as fast as the grid's capacity to keep up with it. We have lots and lots of demand on it. And one of the big loads on the grid that everybody's been talking about is AI and this new call for data centers and, giant leaps being made and demands for gigawatts of power. And I just want to ask you your opinion about whether is this AI data center growth going to be setting us back, or can addressing the challenge be a positive source of disruption that helps us shape that sustainable future we want?
There's no question that it is a big challenge. I would say, though, it's the first challenge, right? This is a warm-up act for what's to come. And when we think about the amount of electrification that we have to do in all of our automobiles and cars and two-wheelers and three-wheelers, to all of our buildings and all of our factories, data centers are a very small portion of this, but it's an opportunity for us to use muscles that we haven't used in the past. And what I would say is that, when we go back to the 50s, we were growing our electricity at 8 to 9% per year here in the United States. In the 60s, it was more 7 to 8%. In the 70s, we got down to the 4 to 5%. And then even in the 80s, we were still growing above 3%. What we're talking about right now for data centers is growing at 1.5 to 2%, right? Which is a big turn because we got to a flat load growth area there over the past couple decades. But they're muscles that we've used before, but we've got to retrain ourselves to use them, number one. The good news is we have loads of new technologies and solutions available that we didn't have back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, using reconductoring technologies that allow us to get more capacity through the same grid lines. We can use grid-enhancing technologies and make our transmission network much smarter to be able to, again, redistribute loads on existing infrastructure. We can also repower existing facilities where we've shut down coal plants and drop in new renewables or other technologies faster than we would otherwise. And we should be looking and trying to innovate across the board. I've mentioned batteries a couple times, but the costs are so much lower and they're dropping so much faster than anyone appreciated. The prospect for us using distributed grid and virtual power plants at scale has never before been possible. And now we see that the very AI that's fueling this initial trend is starting to solve some of the problems of what a decentralized distributed grid can look like, where we've got the ability to plug in automobiles and get bidirectional support at the same time that we're using solar on rooftops, at the same time that we're managing smart thermostats and other technologies. We're at a moment where we can't just use the technologies and approaches from the past. We need to pioneer the new solutions using the resources that are available or coming available. And in the process, we're all going to benefit. It'll lead to lower costs, more resilient grid, and better solutions over time.
Well, all of this brings me back then to where we started, which is the people behind the technology. And I really want to get your take on the leadership that's required to drive this journey that we're on. I'm wondering about your perspective on how organizations can drive change.
Everyone has a role to play, right? Whether you're in finance or HR or in operations, out in the business units, it's amazing how individuals can set a standard or create a practice or inspire a conversation that ultimately leads to companies taking a different stance and creating new solutions. When you look at the companies that have redefined and reset aspirations, and it goes back to, kind of back in the 90s, Interface Carpet saying, we're not going to use petroleum products and we're going to become a net zero company before anyone even knew what net zero meant, over into the early days of Ørsted and Tesla starting to say, what happens if we dramatically re-envision what transportation looks like or what a grid could look like. The last decade here, where companies like Walmart and the big techs like Microsoft and Google started changing their relationship with their supply chains, and in the process inoculated themselves against energy price volatility and a bunch of other things. They future-proofed their business. And now today you see companies tackling the next frontier around things like green steel, where Fortescue and H2 Green Steel or ArcelorMittal are completely re-envisioning what their supply chains and their businesses look like. These are all steps that companies make. And by being bolder, they actually position themselves at a different place in the market. By going faster, you secure not just your place in history, but your place in the future.
Everywhere I look across Siemens right now, I'm seeing this same behavior. Everyone who's part of a team is asking, how does my team actually contribute to this and address this? We've got people in supply chain working on tools to help track emissions across an entire supply chain. We've got people in Siemens Financial Services working on how can they finance the next innovators. We have folks who are working with customers. We have a hyperscaler who came to us recently and said, we need you to build this electrical switchgear for our data centers. How about if you use the green steel that we have an offtake agreement for? Everywhere we look, people are realizing in my normal course of business, if I take an additional step, think about this differently, I'm going to get an outcome that actually promotes our overall business strategy. Our business is sustainability. This is the business that we're in. And Jon, I'd love to end every episode by asking our guests to share their optimistic outlook. If we're successful in enabling the energy transition and experience the exponential growth, paint a picture for what our future will look like.
It's not far away, but we can imagine a world where energy is abundant, clean, and it's equitably distributed. It's a future where the limits of today's systems have really been shattered, where the benefits of clean power are distributed and localized worldwide. And that's jobs, but that's also energy security. And we can also imagine that if we do this right, where people are no longer dying from air pollution, but on the other side, that we're saving lives and handing over a world to our children and grandchildren that we all can be proud of. When I look at this transition, I see how we can create a world that's richer, that's fairer, that's cleaner, that's safer in every way than the world that we have today. And best of all, that world is very much within our reach.
Well, we're in this with you. Thank you, Jon. Okay, was I right? Are you better understanding the momentum pushing the energy transition forward and how you can be a positive force for shaping a more sustainable future? Feel free to share your thoughts with me directly in comments or on my LinkedIn page, or even the newsletter. We'll put the links to those in the show notes, where you'll find additional resources related to what Jon and I discussed.
Please follow us on social media and on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you for tuning in.